Hello. So it's 2:05. We can get started. There's still a few people coming, and that's totally fine. They can shuffle in. But I'd like to welcome you to the School Live information session. I really appreciate you coming here tonight to learn a little bit more about what we have planned. I think it's really exciting, and I think it's appropriate that we start with a prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could please stand with me and say this prayer. This is the prayer that was removed from the public school system in 1962. And so we can pray this together, and I think it's pretty symbolic of what we're trying to do. Almighty God, we acknowledge our dependence upon Thee, and we beg Thy blessings upon us, our parents, our teachers, and our country. Amen. And the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And just remember that under God was added in 1954 in response to the godless Soviet communism. And so that wasn't always here in our Pledge of Allegiance. And I think it's important that we put extra emphasis on the under God part. So feel free to make yourself comfortable. And so we'll show you the announcement video if you haven't seen it already. Raising a child is a timed event with eternal consequences. Choosing a school is perhaps the most important decision a parent makes. Over 15,000 hours of instructional time shapes the minds of our future generation. Who is doing this instruction? What is being taught? Is it working? There is a spectrum of schools based on government control, ranging from home schools to private schools to charter schools to public schools. What is the right choice? At School Alive, we partner with home and church to start children off on the way they should go by developing Christ-like character in pursuit of lifelong learning and service led by faith over fear. Our vision is to become a world leader in authentic education that comprehensively prepares and inspires students to fulfill their God-given purpose. We are a revolutionary Christian school that ignites students' passions, inspiring them to pick up their cross and follow God's will. We are made alive in Christ and believe that real success is being who God made you to be. We're excited to share with you our innovative model for education that is trustworthy, genuine, and effective, incorporating the 7 fundamental disciplines of healthcare, art, mathematics, science, technology, engineering, and religion, or authentic HAMSTER education for short. We believe education is the best safeguard of liberty and truth. We value patriotism and have a deep respect for our nation's motto, "In God We Trust." Our curriculum emphasizes the importance of this principle and how it has shaped our country. We set high expectations, normalize excellence, and foster a culture of honor. Students receive a well-rounded education that not only equips them for academic success, but also for making a positive impact on the world. We are passionate about helping students discover their unique talents and gifts, and we provide opportunities for them to explore and develop these skills regularly with a built-in passion period for passion projects. Our goal is to help each student find their passion and bring it to life. In our safe, transparent, Christ-centered, patriotic, authentic, individualized, and transdisciplinary environment, our students build 21st century skills through real-world experiences. We help them make meaningful connections with content embedded into real-world contexts. At School Alive, we are raising the next generation of Lions and are committed to helping them reach their full potential. We invite you to join our family and make this movement a revolution. All right. Thanks for coming. We'd like to thank God first and foremost for making this happen. We'd like to thank Him for His movement here in Lafayette, Indiana. We'd like to thank my wife, me personally, thank my wife for all of her support through this process. Starting a school from scratch is not always the easiest thing to do. We'd like to thank Church Alive for being so supportive and allowing us to use their facilities, Pastor Owen in particular. And we'd like to thank basically anyone else who has helped us in this endeavor so far.
And so I think it's appropriate maybe to start with a little story illustrating death and life. And so something happened in 2016. Something special, something rare. It happened in the United States. Something dead came alive. And so we're talking about Death Valley. If you've heard of it, basically it's an area where it's really hard to grow stuff, but it doesn't mean that it's impossible. And so the seed wants to grow, and every once in a while, about every 10 years or so, the conditions are right, and you will have something called a super bloom. And the entire Death Valley will just kind of be littered with flowers, and it's just a beautiful sight. And a lot of people try to predict it, but it just goes to show you that just because you think something's dead, it could be alive just under the surface. You just need the right conditions. So we see something similar in the Bible, in Mark 4. And so in Mark 4, we have the parable of the sower, right? And we have Jesus talking about how there's a seed, which is the word of God, that's trying to grow, right? But it needs the right conditions. And so I think it's pretty analogous. And so in school, it's the same idea, right? And so with school, we have these seeds that want to grow, but we need the right conditions for these students to grow. And so a little story about just the minds of these children and just how amazing they are, and they just shows them how they have a mind of their own. There was a little girl, this is a true story, who was sitting in the back of an art classroom, and she was just drawing there, right? And the teacher went over and asked, "Hey, what are you drawing?" And the student said, "I'm drawing God." And the teacher said, "But nobody knows what God looks like." And then the student said, "They will in a minute." So it just goes to show you how much of an amazing imagination these kids have, and we really need to foster that and grow these kids up in a natural environment and allow them to flourish. And so this slide kind of illustrates what we're getting at. And so back a long time ago, ancient Greece and ancient Rome and, way back before our time, they realized that children were very moldable, right? Especially at an early age. They have this neuroplasticity, and if you take a child from one culture and they get raised in a different culture, that nurture aspect of that raising of that child becomes extremely important. So it goes back to this old Greek word paideia, and it's like the enculturation of a child, basically the cultural DNA of a society. And so this culture can get passed down, and it's also becomes basically this idea of politics is just a lagging indicator of cultural change. And so a lot of times they'll say that politics is downstream from culture, and if we see something in politics that we want changed, it's probably something wrong with our culture. And so where does this come from? Abraham Lincoln has a nice quote: "The philosophy of the schoolroom in one generation will be the philosophy of government in the next," right? And so where does this culture come from? A lot of it comes from this 15,000 plus hours of instructional time that they're getting in the school system. And so that's really changing the direction of that fountain. And so I think back to, the motto of this country, "In God We Trust," right? And I think that we're not really necessarily as a whole living up to that. Do we really trust in God? I mean, at one point I thought I was a Christian, but I don't think that I really trusted in God. And so we look at our national motto, we look at our calendar system, before Christ, and then the Latin meaning in the year of our Lord to represent, 2023, the year that we're in right now. Our entire calendar system is based on it. We see it on the license plates. We see it on our money. We put our hand on a Bible, and we swear to tell the truth in a courtroom. And, it's even engraved into our buildings. And so I feel like it's, a bedrock of this country, and we kind of need to return to that. And so, the first president, George Washington, said something very similar. They recognized that religion and morality are indispensable supports of our political prosperity, right? And so just recently in the news, I don't know if you saw it, I'm from New York, not New York City, but I'm from New York. And the mayor, who's a Democrat in New York City, just a couple weeks ago said, when we took prayers out of schools, guns came into schools. And he said, don't tell me about no separation of church and state. And he said, state is the body, church is the heart. And you take away the heart out of the body, and the body dies. And so it just goes to show you that some of these issues kind of cross party lines too, and we might have more agreement on some things than you might think. And so it really kind of leads us to this idea of an educational revolution. And so we really want to revolutionize the educational system. I think a lot of us realize that, but we're not quite sure what to do. And so, why do we plant our seeds in the current educational monopoly and expect them to grow successfully? Albert Einstein said, doing the same thing and expecting different results is pretty much the definition of insanity, right? And so he also said, nothing happens until something moves. And so we really need enough people to move, and then it's going to become a movement. And then that movement, if it becomes big enough, will then become a revolution. And that's really what we need in this country. And so a lot of what's happening now is obsolete, it's ineffective, it's ungodly, and we need a solution as big as the problem. And so what do we do, right? And we need to do this. We know we need to do this for our children and our grandchildren. And I'm concerned personally about putting my own kids in the current educational system. I don't really see a lot of good options. And so if we were to redesign education, what would it look like? And so I'll just give you a brief educational background from what my education looked like. I was born and raised in Elmira, New York, about 3 hours from Buffalo. And my primary education, I went to private Catholic schools all the way up until high school. It was called Holy Family. And I really appreciated that. But, we memorized prayers. I think they sprinkled on some religion, but I don't really think I found my true identity in Christ. And so I don't think I had the right foundation to make that last. And so I went to secondary, Elmira Free Academy, and was exposed to things that I was not exposed to in the private schools. And it's kind of a shame what it's come to. It's definitely gotten worse since then. As part of my high school experience, I got my Eagle Scout award. I was the captain of the varsity swim team. I basically went on to the University of Buffalo, and I majored in chemistry, physics, and math. So I did a triple major. I did a minor in education. And so I really kind of focused on education. I enjoyed it, and I just knew that I wanted to become a teacher. After just sitting there and helping these kids after their class, nobody asked me to do it. They actually thought I was a TA at one point. I would just stay after and really help these kids through their homework. And I just realized I was really passionate about it, and I asked myself, what did I want to do with my life? And so I got a national fellowship as well, and that's me standing up there with the president and vice president of the University of Buffalo receiving that. And they also featured me in a video for academic excellence at the University of Buffalo, which we'll play next.
Education is not just about crossing a course off your list or getting a transcript or a degree at the end. At some point, you'll realize that it means something more. I was in Chemistry 101, and I would stay in this TA lab where the TAs would walk around and help all these students with their assignments. And after I was done with my homework, I would actually stay there and help other people. And I just realized that I loved teaching and tutoring, so ever since that point, I've gotten involved with as many teaching opportunities as I possibly could get involved with. When you find your calling and you become passionate about it, it really makes your experience that much more exciting. And you invest in your own education. You're learning because you want to, not because you have to.
All right, so I was happy and honored to be featured in that video, and then after that, I went on to graduate from the University Honors College, got some awards from my department. That's me standing with the physics department, and I also was chosen to give the speech at the Honors College graduation, which is on YouTube if you'd like to see it. And then I was off to Indiana to become what I now understand to be a Hoosier. I didn't know what that was when I first moved here. It was like, no idea, but I became a Hoosier and a Boilermaker, so part of my national teaching fellowship was to come down and do a specialized program here at Purdue and basically, be placed in a STEM goes rural environment. And so I was placed in 2 different rural schools. The first one was Seeger junior, senior high school, and that's in Warren County. I was there for about a year, taught, integrated chemistry and physics, geometry, calculus, stuff like that. Then I taught for 3 years at Tri-County, middle senior high school, and taught, mainly physics and chemistry and integrated chemistry and physics. And so this is a couple pictures from my classroom. I tried to be as engaging as I could within the confines of the standards. And so it seems like they really enjoyed explosions and fire and all that stuff, and so tried to basically bring chemistry to life for them and show them the importance of it. And I also was involved in teaching international students at Purdue. This was a group of Japanese students that I taught for 3 hours on a course all about air. So for 3 hours we learned about the air, which is what connects us all, really. And I could spend 3 hours talking to you about it, but I won't. Next. And so now I'm basically spend most of my time in the College of Engineering, actually. And so my program's in the College of Education, but I work in the College of Engineering. I'm involved with the EPICS program, which is basically engineering projects in community service. And so we partner with local businesses, and we basically teach these college students how to do engineering in an authentic way, right? So we're doing real design for real people. And I feel like it's a great example of what we're trying to get to with this new school, is bringing us back to something that's authentic and real world experiences. And so I also work for GERI, and so that's the Gifted Education Resource and Research Institute at Purdue, and I teach gifted children. Just got done teaching first and second graders with a microscopic monsters course, so they learned all about viruses, bacteria, like different pathogens, the difference between an endemic, an epidemic, and a pandemic, all of these things in first and second grade. And so it's really amazing what kids can actually learn. They're like real, sponges at that age. And a lot of times they don't learn these things because nobody tries. And so I'm also involved with Catalyst, which is the Center for Advancing the Teaching and Learning of STEM. And so with that, I'm teaching a course, for example, that just started last week. And it's a master's course for teachers who are returning for their master's degree. And that is, half of a semester long. But that allows me to really have an influence over some of the teachers that are entering the education profession at the public school level, mainly. Next. So I live here in West Lafayette, and we got a nice little house and have a family, and we're trying to settle down and build some roots. I've been kind of moving around quite a bit, and I feel like this is a great place to kind of settle down and start a school and do all sorts of awesome things. Next. And so it really kind of happened, I think, in 2020. I had this spiritual awakening, and before that, I don't think I really actually knew Christ. I mean, I knew about God, but as we all know, there's a big difference between knowing and learning about God and actually having a personal relationship with God. And so I really felt called by the Holy Spirit to start this school, and we want to dedicate this school to God and whatever He wants to do with it. And it reminded me of a quote, because I'm looking at what's going on in the world saying, what can I do, God? What can I do? And where are my talents and the needs of the world, right? Wherever those two things cross lies my calling for the most part. And so this quote came into my mind by Edward Everett. He's the one that spoke for a few hours before Abraham Lincoln gave the famous Gettysburg Address, right? And so he spoke, and one of the things that he said, he's an ex-president of Harvard, he said, education is a better safeguard of liberty than a standing army. And so my brother's a combat veteran, and I had thought about joining the military. I have deep respect for that, but I feel like I would better serve the world from education, the field of education. And so the mission, as you heard in the video, is that we want to partner with home and partner with church, right, to start children off on the way that they should go. And the inspiration for that was from Proverbs 22:6. And so it says, start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. And our vision, the inspiration for that, came from the idea in Ephesians 2:10, which is, for we are God's handiwork, masterpiece, right? Created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. And so we have good works to do. God prepared those things for us. And we all have a purpose. We all have a hole to fill in this world while we're here. And so that's, I think the vision is to become a world leader in authentic education that comprehensively prepares and inspires students to actually fulfill that God-given purpose. And we want values to come back into the school. We want good, godly values. You'll recognize the gifts and the fruits of the Holy Spirit. We have the capital virtues over the capital vices. We have 7 ships that we're sailing. We got the 7 practitioners, 1 for each discipline. We got the 7 armors, which you'll recognize from Ephesians. We got 7 characteristics, and the first one is safe, right? Because what's the point in sending your kid anywhere if it's not a safe environment, first and foremost? And so I think that's an important aspect of it. But also transparent. We want to be able to tell and partner with these parents to show them what we're doing. We want it to be Christ-centered, patriotic, authentic, individualized. We want to meet these kids in their unique talents and gifts and be able to individualize and tailor their education for them. And then transdisciplinary as well, which I have a slide on later on. And so really, in order to make an authentic educational system, we need to implement this at 3 different levels. And so we need authentic administration at the administrator level, because a lot of times you'll have teachers that are really working hard in the public schools right now. One of them is my wife. But there's only so much that they can do when the system is set up in the way that it is, right? And so you really need the backing of your administration. You also need authentic teaching happening at the teacher level, and then authentic learning happening at the student level. And this idea of authentic learning is basically real-world learning, right? We want people to build 21st century skills through real-world experiences. And so you'll notice that term is also an umbrella term for other types of learning that you may have heard of, such as project-based learning or inquiry-based learning or case-based or collaborative learning. We're basically creating an umbrella term that encapsulates other forms of learning. And so in order for it to be authentic, you can kind of think about some characteristics. There's 9 of them here, but what we mean when we say authentic learning is that it has to have a genuine design, right? So we have to have this idea of planning, because if you don't have a plan, that basically is a plan to fail. I don't know if you've heard that before, but it's really true, especially with education. We want to implement that plan. We want to deliver this in a safe environment that's flexible, long-lasting, and we want to make sure that it's implemented in a way that reflects this rapidly changing world that we're in. We want to make sure that we have evaluation, so you want to assess the process and the product, right? And we want to do this in a way to give timely feedback, meaningful and timely feedback, right? Because some of the assessments that are happening in schools right now, like the bubble tests and whatnot, are we actually giving them meaningful and timely feedback as a result of those tests? Are those assessments really purposeful? So the next category would be purposeful guidance. We want them to be able to make progress in a cyclical fashion. We want them to have systems in place to guide them, and so they can utilize SMART goals. They can utilize systems to basically allow them to make progress. We want to be able to have inspiration. We want to motivate these kids to take the first step, and it's what it's all about sometimes, taking that first step. We want expertise, so we want to expose these kids to experts in their fields and be able to have them learn from real practitioners in the world. And we also want to have structured communication. And so we want partnership, right? Nothing happens by yourself, like this school, for example. It's not going to happen with just me, right? And so really nothing happens, at least on a larger scale, without partnership and cooperation and collaboration with other people. We want integration of, and basically unification of a variety of perspectives. We want to integrate different disciplines. And then we also have expression. So we want these kids to be able to express themselves, be able to reflect and articulate their ideas. We want them to be able to command the English language, right? And be able to communicate in a way that allows them to fulfill their God-given purpose. And so if you're wondering where we get these disciplines from, if you've heard of STEM, it stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And STEM is pretty popular, and they're pushing it pretty hard right now. But that does come at the expense of other disciplines. And so that, namely art is one that it comes at the expense of. And so my daughter right now goes to the STEAM Academy, which adds art, right? So you got science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics. And often, especially with some of the private Christian schools, they add R as well. Some people add R for other things, but R would be for religion. And so then you get STREAM. And I was thinking to myself back in 2020, does that actually include everything that we need to be teaching these children? And I think that we all know, based on what happened around that time with COVID and with the healthcare system, that healthcare is something that I think we need to focus more on. Healthcare is also something that we all experience. We all need to take care of ourselves on a regular basis. We all are going to get sick. We all are going to know people who are sick, and we have a limited time on this planet. And so I think healthcare and really taking a strong emphasis on healthcare is going to be important. And so I added H, and then I came up with a new acronym. I put it into a word generator, and the only thing that popped out was hamster. So I laughed at first, but then I thought about a hamster wheel, and I was like, hey, that kind of makes sense, because education should be like a hamster wheel in a sense, because it should be lifelong, it should never end, it should be continuous, and you're making progress in a cyclical way, and as this wheel rotates forward, it's also a cyclical process that never ends. So it's continuous, and also as it rotates, these disciplines blur together, and so you kind of transcend the idea of disciplines themselves. Next. And so these 7 disciplines, we basically have some operational definitions of them, but I think we all kind of understand what they are. I will point out that art is not just about painting, okay? And so when I first said this to a couple people, they're like, well, where are you going to have English? I'm like, well, what about the language arts, right? So visual arts, language arts, performing arts. Another area where some people get a little confused is science, and that's my area of expertise. And so with science, a lot of times when people think of science, they think only of natural science. And natural science is not the only science that exists, right? And so we have social science as well. We have political science, historical science, and we have, law. We have a lot of other things. We have psychology, right? A lot of other branches of science that we can include, and it's basically just an exploration of mysteries in pursuit of predictive and explanatory power. And so we want to basically have these kids be caring. We want them to be colorful, calculated, curious, clever, creative, and communal. And so those are some of those C words that kind of describe what we're getting at with these practitioners of these disciplines. Next. And so to elaborate a little bit further on the idea of transdisciplinary, where does that come from? Well, if you start with intradisciplinary, that's basically working inside of a single discipline or chunk. And then you get into multidisciplinary, which is people from different disciplines working together, right? You have more than one discipline. You've probably heard maybe of cross-disciplinary. That's viewing one discipline from the perspective of another discipline. And then you have interdisciplinary, which is basically integrating knowledge and methods from different disciplines together. And what I think we're trying to really get at is the idea that there really are no disciplines. It's kind of a human invention. And so the only reason why we have disciplines is so that we can chunk information into categories, right? And so our brain makes sense of things by chunking information. And I think if we have these 7 fundamental disciplines, we still need to recognize that even within those, there's a lot of blurry lines that take place. And so transdisciplinary talks about basically creating a unity of intellectual frameworks beyond the idea of disciplines. And so that's what the real world is like, right? So we'll give you an example of that. With music, something as simple as music, how can music be just art, right? It's not. Something like music, which we all experience in the real world, it could be healthcare. And so there was a substitute teacher at one of the schools I worked for, and she was a music therapist. I didn't even know that those existed, but I do now. And I know that there's a lot of healing purposes involved in music. Something like math, you have patterns and timing. Something like science, we have the sound waves and all of the things that go along with the science behind music. We have technology with the audio editing that we have now. We have engineering of the instruments and the environments that this music, is being played in. And then we also have worship, right? Worship is a big part of what we do as Christians, and music can really help out with that, right? And so something as simple as music, you can kind of see how it kind of transcends the boundaries of any particular category. Next. And so what does this look like? We put together a quick video, and this hopefully will kind of shine some light and illustrate what this authentic hamster education would look like. All right. Did anybody see kind of the transition a little bit from hamster, healthcare, art, mathematics? So hopefully that gives you a general idea of what we're talking about when we talk about hamster, okay? So where are we on the spectrum of government control? So hopefully we can maybe shine some light on what makes us different, okay? So on the spectrum of government control, you have basically homeschools on one side and public schools on the other. And we like to think that we're somewhere between homeschool and private school. A lot of the private schools end up accepting government money, and that comes with the benefit of, financial assistance. But where government money flows, government regulation follows shortly after. And so we really want to have a flexible environment here where we can have real innovational change in education. And in order for that to take place, we do not plan on accepting any money that has strings attached to it. And so that kind of puts us a little bit more towards the homeschool side of the spectrum. And so in terms of the Indiana law, if you go to the frequently asked questions on the Indiana Department of Education, you'll basically see the the number one here. How does Indiana state law refer to homeschools? And homeschools in Indiana are referred to as non-public, non-accredited schools. And so we're going to fall basically into the same category legally as a homeschool. And so number two are, what are the legal requirements for homeschools in Indiana? We're really blessed to live in a state that stands for freedom compared to some other states where I'm from. And so what we need to do is have attendance records, which is not a big deal. We can provide those if they are requested. And we also need to provide instruction that is equivalent to that given in public schools, but that's not actually defined with, what is instruction equivalent to that given in public schools actually mean. And so there's a lot of flexibility with what we can do. And so with this, if you're thinking about homeschooling, I know that I definitely did. It can be hard. There's pros and cons to homeschooling, right? There's pros and cons to everything. And so with homeschooling, you have a great moral foundation that you're able to instill in your child. You have a customized education, you have a flexible schedule, you have more individual attention given to your child, you have a controlled environment. But some of the cons might be that you have limited social interaction. You have lack of structure, parental burnout. It becomes very hard for a parent to teach potentially every discipline at every level, right? And so potentially limited resources, limited expertise. Nobody knows everything. We're all pretty ignorant on an absolute scale, right? There's a lot out there to know, and we don't all know everything. And so it's nice to be able to expose yourselves to different experts. And there's ways of doing that through co-ops and whatnot. But what we want to do is basically offer something that keeps all of the pros of homeschooling, but gets rid of the cons. How does this compare to some of the schools that are here in Tippecanoe County? Well, first off, you're probably going to be better off in the private schools if you're here today and you would like a godly education. You're better off choosing one of these schools. And so in terms of the private Christian schools here in Indiana, we fall in the same category as Livingstone Homeschool Academy, if you've heard of that. And so we're government-free with a high school option. And the other options would have government control. You have Lafayette Catholic and Faith Christian School. They have that government control, but they do have a high school. And then Lafayette Christian and St. James Lutheran, they have the government control with no high school. And so you'll have to figure out what you want to do for high school. But in terms of pricing, I think that we tried to come in at a price point that was fair and comparable to some of the other schools in the area. And so for the tuition for 2024-2025, we plan on charging $7,000 per year per student, which is $700 per month. So when you're looking at prices, make sure you understand that some places will tell you how much you pay over 10 months, and some people will tell you how much you pay over 12 months. And so that's something to watch out for. So if you pay over 12 months, it's about $583, and then there'll be a $1,000 one-time new student fee, and that's mainly for technology, because we really need to teach and raise this next generation up in an environment that teaches them how to use technology responsibly, and we can leverage that technology to make massive gains. And so we need to have individual devices for all of these kids. That can get expensive. We need to maintain these devices. And so that is the reason for the new student fee. Next. Okay, so we want to be really transparent with where this money goes. And so 100% of the tuition, it'll go into one of two buckets. And so the first bucket is to the faculty. We think that the majority of the money should go directly to the people that are making the school run on a daily basis, which is your teachers and your principal, your head teacher. And then the rest of the money falls into the other category where there's only like 4 things that you can do with money, right? You can give it, you can save it, you can spend it, or you can invest it. And so I kind of got this idea out of the Bible through the idea of tithing. And so you'll see on the right side, it's all 10%. And so here you'll see our goal is to get up to about 70 students. So we want the school about half full for the first year. And what that'll do is that'll allow us to pay the teachers comparably to what the public school teachers are making. And then after that, when we get up to 100 students, we'll be able to pay even more, and this would represent if the school is full the first year. And so when we first open, we'll have 100 slots total, and so if we completely fill the school the first year, then we can get our teachers up into the $50,000 to $70,000 range. And so we really want to make sure that we attract and retain high-quality teachers at our school here. I think it's really important. The school is only going to be as good as its teachers. And so the last one would be once the high school opens, we'd have up to 140 students, and then we are pushing the teachers as close to 6 figures as possible. And so we really think that we want to pay teachers what they deserve. Not all teachers deserve to make that much, but the good ones do. And so with this system, we're going to open in the fall of 2024, and we're not going to have the high school open the first year for multiple reasons, but the first graduating class will be the 8th graders, and that'll represent the class of 2029. And so we'll have 14 grades eventually, and we'll chunk them to have some vertical integration. And so you have pre-K and kindergarten together, and that represents level 1. First and second graders together, similar to the gifted course I just taught. That'll be level 2, all the way up through level 7. And when you first start the educational system, part of the goal here, it goes back to the original liberal arts. And the first 3 is grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And so when you first start the educational system, these kids don't necessarily even know what they're passionate about, right? And so the goal is to have that language development and to expose them to as much as possible. Then they start understanding things, and we focus on thought mechanics more when it comes to middle school. And then as they transition into high school, it gives them a wonderful time to apply this knowledge into their lives. So all students will be enrolled full-time. It'll follow a very similar schedule to the rest of the schools in the area, so 180 school days. So that's 45 days a quarter, 90 days a semester. We'll have max of 10 students per grade, 20 students per level, right? And so that means 140 students total. So there's really not too many slots open. And so with 10 slots per grade, though, we feel like we can really build those relationships with these kids that we're going to need to be able to do in order to treat them as individuals and identify their individual passions and facilitate the growth of that passion. So this is a little picture of me teaching these gifted children at Purdue, and it just got me thinking, like, why don't we have this as normal education? Like, I don't get it. Why does this have to be gifted education? And so why don't we just build a whole school like this? And so it's wonderful, some of the things that are going on over there, but let's expand on that and maybe offer a full solution. And so really our goal is to have these kids operating at a 12th grade level by the time they reach 8th grade. And that's not going to happen the first year. We got to meet kids where they're at, but as they get the entire benefit of the system, that'll hopefully be the end result. And so this is a school for gifted students. And so safety is a number one priority. At School Alive, we have the freedom to be able to implement security measures that might not be able to be implemented elsewhere. And so we're definitely going to have the background checks for anyone involved with School Alive. We'll make sure we have medical training and first aid training and be able to deal with any medical emergencies that might arise. We'll have the cameras, we'll have surveillance. We plan on having a head of security, and we will have armed personnel protecting these students because we don't want to be sitting ducks. And you probably know that most mass shootings happen in gun-free zones, and so we really want to make sure that these kids are protected and we are able to stop any threats that hopefully we'll never have to, but we want to make sure that these kids are really, really safe. That's first and foremost. And so transparency is another really important thing for us. We want to make sure that you know what your kid is learning, and so every single level, every single discipline, every week, we'll send a brief outline of what the kid is learning. And if you would like to know additional details, you're free to ask, and then we can inform you of what's happening inside these classrooms. We're really excited about the passion period, honestly. I feel like some schools say that they want to individualize their education, but they don't really do a good job at it. And so we want to build that into the system so that they have time to exercise their passion as a normal part of their school day. So as they're, learning new things and figuring out what they're passionate about, they can actually then exercise that in the form of passion projects so that by the time they're done with this school system, they have a really good understanding of what they want to do in the world. And so they're not going to be in a situation where, they're changing majors, hopefully, in college and playing around with thousands of dollars in terms of student debt and whatnot. All the crazy statistics that are out there right now about how people are getting degrees in biology and then they're going to go and work for Geico, and it doesn't make any sense. We really want them to understand what they're going to do after high school, and I think one of the really important things to do then is to allow them to exercise that passion. But by passion, we don't just mean fun and games. It's not a time for them to just, play around and have fun. And it is that to a certain extent, but the word passion is a little deeper than that. We can think back to the passion of Christ, and we know that passion is an intense emotion. It's love, but it also has a sacrificial component to it. And so we are all called to pick up our cross and follow God's will, and we need to identify where our talents are and the needs of the world, and then put ourselves there so that we can fulfill our whole in the world. And so it's going to be largely independent, but the teachers are going to help facilitate this period, and we're going to check in with them every quarter so that they can update their passion project, because we don't expect their passion to stay the same from pre-K all the way through high school. I mean, they might be interested in different things, right? And so we want to check back in with them on these passion projects as they move through the system. Next. And so we also want to partner with local businesses. We already have a couple in mind, which we will announce in the future, but we really want to partner with experts in the community that we can connect these students to, because part of starting them off on the way they should go, part of allowing them to exercise their passion is identifying what that is and then connecting them with those people in the community that do it for a living. And those are the people that we need. We don't expect our 7 teachers to know everything, right? I mean, art is a pretty big discipline, for example. So we don't expect our art teacher to know how to play every musical instrument, speak every language, like it's just impossible. And so we really need to partner with people that we can connect these students with. These partners can come in and help teach our kids, in a safe way, obviously, but we really want to make sure that we can connect them to the experts in the disciplines that they care about. Yep. And so for lunch, some people were asking about lunch. For the most part, we'll do similar to what Livingstone does. Students will bring their own lunch. However, I think it would be appropriate to offer catering every once in a while. And I also think it'd be really fun, especially with the healthcare discipline. Part of healthcare is nutrition and learning how to cook and all that. And so we have access to that here. And I think it would be really nice every once in a while to have, for example, level 5 maybe come up with a menu and have like their little business that they set up, and they can offer food services till maybe level 1, and so maybe they can cook lunch for that particular day, and they can take the orders and whatnot. So we might have some student cooked meals occasionally as well. I think that would be pretty authentic. And so we also need to be pretty mobile with our storage solutions. And so one of the things that I've been doing is creating these pack-out. Milwaukee pack-out makes a pretty durable and modular storage system. And so this is one that I put together already. So we already have the microscopes for the school. We have 8 microscopes. This is one set here. And so these are, pretty good microscopes for sure. And they can be easily transported in and out of the classroom and allow them to use the microscopes, but then we don't necessarily have to keep them there and have to worry about the storage of it. And so we do plan on having some mobility in terms of our storage. Next. Along that same note, with the technology, we want to make sure that that's protected, because technology can be really expensive, and we also want to make sure it's charged so they don't get here in the morning and then we have to charge their device and it's not working. So we plan on getting these charging carts, and so the devices will be managed by us, and we'll make sure all of the parental controls are worked out so that they're not, getting on ungodly things, which unfortunately in our society, it's just one click away from the devil basically manifesting himself to you. And we understand that, and we take that seriously, and so we need to make sure that we have protections in place for our technology, but we're excited about that because that allows us to really go to the next level of individualization. And so we have all sorts of apps that they can use, like the Holy Bible app, Duolingo, if you're familiar with that. Khan Academy is a wonderful resource. And so all sorts of different things that can really help them learn, and it can be really engaging for them. And so in terms of our curriculum, we're not adopting any particular curriculum. We want to be really eclectic with our curriculum choice. And so we also don't want to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of good stuff out there that already works. I mean, when it comes to math, for example, it's not like you can go too far outside of the box to teach someone multiplication, okay? So we don't need to reinvent everything in education. We want to keep what works and then focus on embedding that content into an authentic context where they can learn it in a little bit more of an authentic way. And so we want to build good habits, so there'd be a habitual component to this. So for example, with healthcare, they're going to come in and exercise, and taking care of your physical health is going to be a natural part of what they do. And so that'll be built in habitually into their routine. And, for example, with religion, it might be, prayer or devotional that they do. With math, it might be they're working on their modules on an individual basis for the first 10 minutes or something like that. And so you might have a first grader working on fourth grade math, and then also have a first grader working on first grade math. And so you can have some flexibility there with these tools. And so we really want to not tie ourselves tightly to any particular curriculum, but we are going to be looking to not reinvent the wheel, and to see what's out there, see what works, and be eclectic with that. And so this will give you an example of what I'm talking about with math. So this is through Khan Academy, and so you can see how they have the math track kind of laid out all the way from pre-K through 8th grade, and then you can look at the high school as well. They got geometry all the way up to multivariable calculus and stuff. And so that would be really awesome if we could have our high school experience be they're learning really advanced math that is really way above the norm. And so we want them to be able to work at their own pace through some of this stuff. Next. And so after graduation, keeping in mind that we need to offer some sort of a comparable education to the public schools. Like when we talk about this as an education revolution, we can't revolutionize this to the extent that it's unrecognizable by society, right? Like we still have to jump through certain hoops. And so we don't want to limit these kids' options, for example, after graduation, right? Because some of these kids, not all of them, but some of them might want to go to Purdue. And when the Purdue admissions people look at their stuff, their transcript, we want to make sure that that's, we're telling their story in a way that's understandable to the rest of the world. And so we don't want to limit our students' choice, but we are going to have to jump through some hoops. So we can use Purdue as kind of like a benchmark for that. With the standards and resources, the Indiana Department of Education, we can use these as kind of benchmarking tools. We don't necessarily have to follow them to the T, but we also want to make sure that we're incorporating some of the stuff that is learned in the public school system. It's not all bad, right? But we have some standards that we can use. We have state and national standards that we can take a look at and make sure that we are covering all of our bases when it comes to after graduation. And so one other thing to consider is the minimum high school requirements for Purdue. So I talked with Rob Mate, who's a senior assistant director there at Purdue. And so we will be continuing to work together as the high school opens to make sure that when they're in high school, we can easily show that they're completing what they need to be completing. For example, they have to have 8 semesters of math, 6 semesters of lab science, and so on, right? And so we want to make sure that that's clear on their transcripts, and we're not, limiting your child's option after graduation just in case they do want to go to Purdue. There's a lot of other options after high school other than college. They might start their own business. They might not go to college at all. But we want them to have a really good plan of what they're going to do after high school, and some of those plans are going to include something like Purdue. And they also require SAT scores, and so we'll help the students through that process as well. If they need to take the SAT, we can offer some assistance with the SAT preparation. And so what is this going to look like? Basically 40 minutes every day or 80 minutes every other day, based on if you do a traditional or a block schedule. And so my first school at Seeger, I think we were on a traditional, and then my second school at Tri-County, we did a combination of the two. But you have a schedule for multiple reasons, but I think it's necessary to provide structure to the day, and just from an efficiency perspective. And so we don't necessarily want to waste a lot of time. We want to have a structured routine where we can, get into the groove and make a lot of progress. And so that's kind of the layout there. There'll be 8 periods, 1 for each discipline, and then that 8th period is going to be the passion period that we talked about. And so as we wrap up here, I want you to think about how this is going to look like in this building. And so this is a blueprint of this facility here, and you can kind of make out where we are right now on the top left. And And so we'll have a moment to tour in a little bit, but let's just kind of run you through what a day would look like here, okay? What an example would look like. So they're going to start by arriving, right? And so that would happen at 7:30 to 8 o'clock in the morning. The parents can drop their kids off, and we'll be accepting them through the doors. And we're going to start, though, at about 8 o'clock. So at 8 o'clock, we're going to be in the sanctuary united together. We don't have some sort of a announcement system or something like that, so we really want to gather together. We think that that's really a nice thing to be able to do at the beginning and the end of each day. And then, so that'll be just about 5 minutes in the morning, and then they'll immediately then go to their first class, which in this case would be, let's say, level 1. And so they would head out for healthcare, which we think is appropriately positioned next to the kitchen and in the cafe area where they have a free open space out there. They can put down some exercise mats. They can do some exercise. We can get a projector out there for the wall, but they can also have easy access to outdoors if they want to do outdoor activities. And so that will be healthcare. Then they'll move to art, which would be actually back in here. And so you can see how most of these chairs are pretty mobile. Keep in mind, something like painting is not something they're doing every day. But if you move all these chairs out of the way, not all of them, but you move a decent amount of the chairs out of the way, it's just concrete floors, and so you can put up the easels, and we can do painting in here. If any of the kids drop a little bit of paint, it'll be really easy to clean up after them, and so then we can easily get this back into shape for worship on Sundays. And so the next thing they'll do is go to math, and math will be in that room. You'll see in a little bit when you tour. If you haven't seen it, feel free. Then they'll go to science, which is in that corner, and this is the initial plan for these rooms. We think that this is going to be the case, but you can see the rooms and find out for yourself how this is going to look. And then right after that, they're going to go to lunch, if this is a traditional schedule. And so lunch will be out in the lobby. We'll have some collapsible tables set up, and we want to have a nice, easy, cleanable space for them to eat and not have to get any crumbs or anything on the chairs in here and spill anything like that. And so half the school will be eating lunch, and half the school will go out to recess. And so from lunch, you go out to recess. We can go out those doors in the back. Part of that's for security purposes. That way, nobody from the road knows that we're leaving the school in the back. So we think that that's a good access / exit point to use. And then the next thing will be technology. And you'll notice when you go and look at that room right now, it's actually one big room, but there can be a divider, which was initially planned in the blueprint of this building. And so there'll be a nice soundproof accordion door that can just kind of close those two rooms off. And then they'll go to engineering. And then they'll wrap up the day with religion. And the religion is going to be in the youth room, which is kind of already used for that purpose already. So they have some speakers in there. They got the cross set up. And so when you see it, it kind of makes sense to put the religion in that room. They'll actually be back with their first teacher for the Passion Period. So every teacher is not only going to teach their discipline, but they're going to facilitate one of the Passion Periods. And so in this case, the healthcare teacher is going to facilitate that Passion Period for level 1, and so on. And so they'll go back to their Passion Period location, which was the first period, and then they're going to go back here to the sanctuary, and they'll unite again in the afternoon. And then at that point, we're going to do dismissal out the same pretty much doors. We want to make sure that this is organized. We want to make sure that there's not huge lines out there and that kids are just running out there and potentially getting into vehicles with people other than approved pickup people. And so we definitely want to make sure that that's a very secure process in terms of the dismissal. But that's the general idea of what we want to do. And we can go around now and see. But before we do that, I'd like to draw your attention to the website. If you haven't looked at it, please do. There's some additional information there. You can go to www.schoolalive.com, and there's 4 basic tabs up at the top. And so as we wrap up the presentation part of this, just understand that, we really want this to be a call to action for you and for others. There's people that couldn't make it today, and so we depend on you to help spread the word. But we want you to apply to enroll your student for 2024 to 2025 school year. So it's not going to be this coming fall, but the next fall. So we have some time. We have over a year to make this happen, but we can start taking those applications now. And also apply to join our team. So we have executive, faculty, and support positions open, and you'll see those on the website. We want you to become a School Alive partner. So if you have a local business in the area that you think you could provide some expertise to our students, we would love to partner with you. And so let us know. And then, like I said, spread the word. You can go to the bottom of the website and subscribe to stay updated with our newsletter. There'll also be a spot for a donation button if you feel called to do so. But most importantly, we need prayer. And so just keep us in your prayers as we go through this process of opening this godly, revolutionary Christian school. And so thank you for your attention and your attendance. And we'll move on at this point to the tour/break/leave. So if you have all the information you need, you could feel free to head out. This is also a great time to get up, stretch your legs, go to the bathroom, and then you can tour the facility. All the doors are open, all the lights are on, and then what we'll do is we'll meet back in here around 3:20 for the Q&A session. So if you have questions until 4 o'clock, we're going to be here. You can come up and ask your question, and then we can get a little bit of conversation going, and I can hopefully answer your questions, whatever they may be. All right? So thank you so much again, and feel free to get up, stretch your legs, go take a tour, and so we'll see you back here in about 15 minutes, and then we'll start our Q&A. Thank you. If you have a question, you can come up and maybe form a line here. We can do this in somewhat of a structured fashion, and then you can speak right into that microphone if you don't mind. That way we can get it on the recording as well, and everybody can hear the question. So does anybody want to start us off with some questions here? If you need some time to think about some questions, that's fine too, but I'd like to answer anything that I did not address in the presentation. So feel free to come on up and ask your question, and I'll try to answer it the best that I can. Hello. Oh, yeah. You can just go over there and then speak into the microphone. Thank you.
Okay, so I had a couple questions about the teachers, and you might have said something and I may have just missed it, but
Okay.
Is each teacher, is there just 7 of them, like one for each discipline?
Yes, there's 7 teachers for one for each discipline, yes.
Okay, so they're teaching all grades, like the art teacher's teaching all grades?
Correct.
That subject, okay. I wondered, since you have the Christian component or the religion component, are all of your teachers, is that a criteria, or is that only a criteria for the person that's responsible for religion?
Okay, that's a great question. So just to recap, the first part of that question was, in terms of teachers, how many teachers are there? There's 7 teachers, and they're going to teach all of the disciplines. One discipline per teacher, but at all levels, right? And then the second part of the question is in regards to religion, and is it only going to be the religion teacher that is teaching things from a Christ-centered perspective, and what are we looking for with our teachers? Is that your question?
Right.
Okay. So the answer to that would be all of the teachers are going to be teaching their disciplines in a Christ-centered worldview. So the idea of Christ-centeredness is going to be cutting across all disciplines. So when we look for teachers, we're looking for a few things. Number one, we want them to be really passionate and knowledgeable about their particular discipline and be able to be flexible. So the second thing would be we want them to be flexible, and we want them to be able to teach this at all levels, and we want them to be hungry for innovational change in the educational system. Another thing is that we really want them to be a strong believer and have faith in Jesus and be led by Jesus and walk alongside him. And so we want strong believers that are passionate about teaching, passionate about their discipline, to step in and really make some wonderful revolutionary changes to education.
Okay. And then with the kids you said your goal is 10 kids per grade. So are those 10 kids, I guess they're traveling with the same 10 kids all day for all classes? Am I understanding that right?
Yes. Yeah, so to recap, the question is, with these kids, are they traveling with the same 10 kids the whole day? Yes, the students will be rotating through all 7 disciplines throughout the day. So there's 7 levels, 7 disciplines, 7 teachers, right? And so the students rotate throughout the day. However, within one level, you have 2 grades with vertical integration. And so you have first and second graders together, and that provides a unique thing here where we can have kind of a leapfrogging effect through the system. So they're never going to be really the youngest or the oldest in their particular level. So that gives them the opportunity to be a mentor and a mentee as they go from year to year. So their group of students that they're with is going to be changing from year to year slightly, but the grade that they're in is not going to change. So that 10 group that they're in for their grade, they stay with that 10 the whole time.
Okay. And then my last question, you talked a little bit about preparing them for college, SAT prep. Do you know, I'm not from Indiana, so I don't know the Indiana, even what the rules are here, but I guess in elementary and high school, if there are accreditation standards as far as someone that wants to transfer in or out, and how that would be recognized by, say, public schools or private schools, since your structure's a little bit different, what would that look like for somebody transferring in or transferring out?
Okay, yeah, it's a good question. So what does it look like when people transfer in and out of the system? How do people kind of understand what we're doing here, which we're trying to be revolutionary, but we're also trying to fit within the confines of what people understand? And so part of that would be that we have those tools that I showed up there where they're going to be working through some more habitual things, like with math, for example. They'll be working on first grade, second grade math, and so that follows kind of right along with what the public school does. And we are, by law, supposed to be offering a education that is comparable to the public schools, and so we are going to do that. We actually are going to do much more than that. And so I'm not worried about whether or not these kids are going to be prepared for college, but we are concerned and are working on making sure that that other people recognize what we're doing, and that can translate. And along with, when it comes to people entering from other schools, remember I said this is a school for gifted children, and we really want them to reach 12th grade performance by 8th grade. Along with that, we understand that if they're coming in from a different school into our school, it's going to be different. And so we have to meet them with where they're at. And so it'll be very individualized in that sense. And so eventually, though, once they get the whole benefit of the system, then they will be operating most likely multiple grade levels ahead of where they should be. So they shouldn't have any problems exiting. I think the big exit to be concerned about would be the one into college, potentially, if that's what they choose. And that'll be the one where we are really concerned with the transcripts and making sure that we cross our T's and we dot our I's, and we make sure we work with Purdue admissions, for example, as the benchmark to make sure, if they can get into Purdue University as an example, they can probably get into a lot of other places as well. And so we can use that as a benchmark because it's real close, and I plan on also, I'm currently working there, and so I have connections there, and so it makes sense to do that, I think. Does that answer your question?
Yes, one more since
Go ahead.
From your answer. I've heard, and again, I'm not from Indiana, I think they have like iRead test or something else. I grew up in Virginia, so it was standards of learning testing, SOLs. Since it's not under the government scope, does that mean that you are not subject to any of those kinds of testing, or is that something that you would incorporate or not? I don't know how that works.
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually believe that we will not be able to, even if we wanted to, which we don't. So the question was involving standardized testing. We don't really support that one-size-fits-all type of approach. Other countries like Finland they look to the United States and they're like, you got to get rid of those standardized tests. And so I think that, they offer some utility, but from a practical perspective, a lot of those standardized tests aren't always used to provide timely and meaningful feedback into the classroom. And so any assessment that we do is going to be very purposeful and to the benefit of the student. And so no, I guess the short answer is no, we don't plan on doing any of those standardized testings, that they do in Indiana. And again, I don't even think we could if we wanted to. The only one that I will say that we will support would be the SAT or the ACT, and that's only because that's a necessary hoop to jump through depending on the college that they want to go to. And so through that process, we can help them with the SAT prep a little bit and make sure we guide them through that process to take the SAT and get a good score. I know when I took the SAT, I only took it once and I never studied for it, and it was good enough, thank God, to do what I needed to do. But I really hope that we take it a little more seriously than I did when I was in high school, because it does open up some doors for you. So for example, I did not get into the honors college at the University of Buffalo the first year that I attended. And that was partially because I didn't even realize that there was an honors college. So I didn't even know it was a possibility. But I guess if I would have looked more into it and done my diligence and scored better on my SATs, then I could have potentially gotten in there, which gave me access to all sorts of other resources. They do have an honors college at Purdue as well. And so I think it is really important that if you're going to do it, you should do it right. You should study for it, get a really good grade on it, jump through that hoop, and get it done. And so I don't think they're going to have an issue doing that, because they should have a really strong math background at this school. But we definitely want to make sure we teach to that test, for that particular test, which in general we want to stay away from that.
Okay, thank you so much, appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for coming. Hello.
Hi. So I would guess that finding the right teachers for all of your different disciplines is going to be critical to the success of the school. So I guess what is that pursuit of finding all these teachers and putting them in the right positions? What does that look like? What progress have you made? I know it's like a year and a half away, so you still have some time, but are there nibbles? Have you found some people that are already kind of on board or giving consideration to joining this pursuit?
Yeah, we do have some nibbles already. We have teachers that have applied already for the positions. We also have students who have applied already. And so it does look pretty promising. On YouTube, our announcement video, I believe, is over 18,000 views now. And so I feel like we're starting to get out there and get the word out. We are very new, like you said, and it's going to be over a year before we start. But as we start this teacher recruiting process, we'll be looking for really elite teachers to come in and be able to teach these disciplines all the way up through the college level. And so ideally, somebody for the healthcare discipline, for example, maybe they have prior nursing experience, or maybe they were a teacher. But keep in mind, we're not necessarily looking for only people who have teaching experience in the current system. And so we'll just be evaluating our candidates and our students on an individual basis. I think that's the only way to do it. And so we'll be just looking at their experience and their background, and then we want to pour as much into these kids and teachers as possible. And so I'll be stepping in as the principal or head teacher, and I'm basically going to be filling a role that is a little bit different from some of the other principal positions that you might see. And so somebody like me can go in and actually provide meaningful assistance to these teachers. I actually could step in as the math or the science teacher. I'm very comfortable doing that at all levels. And so I can work really closely with the science and math teacher in particular, and I have some great ideas for the other teachers as well. But we want to provide whoever the teachers are with weekly professional development and develop them professionally, because the school is only as good as the teachers. And so we're opening up the application process. Some people still don't even know that this is a real thing, and so it is real. And so applications are going to continue to come in, and we're going to interview these candidates, and we have plenty of time to pick the right teachers, and hopefully we arrive at the decision that is best for everybody. And we know that God has had a big play in this so far. There's no way that I could have gotten to where we are right now without God's help. And so we just trust in God. We go back to the motto of the United States: in God we trust, and we trust that this is going to play out in the way that He wants. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Hello.
Yeah.
So your compensation model for your teachers that you presented earlier, Looks like you have different plans for compensation when someone is, when you're first starting out and your classes are at, say, half capacity
Yeah.
versus when you're at full capacity. How do you plan to approach the situation where, say, kindergarten and first grade decide to fill up first before, 7th and 8th grade do?
Okay. So the question was involving the payment system, and I definitely should go into more detail on that, and I think I'll answer your question as I do that. Let me know if I don't. So with the payment system that we came up with here, one thing to keep in mind is that we can't print money like the government does. We can't just invent money and just give it to you. And so we have a certain pot of money that we have, and so based on how many students, it'll be $7,000 per student, right? And that doesn't matter if they're in first, second grade. It doesn't matter what level they're in. We have a certain pot of money that's coming from tuition based on the student enrollment, right? And if we're half full, then that means we can pay teachers like we're talking about, comparable to the public school teachers. If we're completely full, then we can really pay our teachers what they deserve, up closer to that six-figure mark. And so really what we developed is kind of a percentage-based system where everybody has skin in the game. Everybody's a part of this mission. Me as the principal who's stepping in there will be paid at the same salary range as the teachers. And so we really want some amazing teachers to step into these positions and be willing to ride this boat with us. We're going to have some ups and downs. But we think it makes a lot of sense to do it that way, and we think it's pretty fair to do it that way, and so we will all benefit together, and we're all going to suffer together. We're all in the same boat, but I really think that we'll be in good shape. I'm going to be in that same boat with everyone else. Does that kind of answer your question? Okay.
You said that the curriculum would be eclectic, which is wonderful. Do you have any ideas already? Or is that going to be something like the teacher will decide with you, all of the teachers will decide together? How will that work?
That's a great question. So the question was related to the curriculum, and she said that it's great that it's going to be eclectic, right? But do I have any ideas of what that's going to look like? Or are we just going to expect the teachers to create everything on their own, or are we going to create it together? What does that look like? So the answer to that, I believe, is that, yes, I do have a lot of ideas for curriculum, especially in math and science, because those are my expertises, but I also have a lot of good ideas, I feel, for the other disciplines. So, for example, for art, right? Like, we talk about, like, learning how to read and write and, and do these things. We definitely need to learn how to read and write. Like, writing is almost indistinguishable from thinking. Like, you solidify your thoughts on paper, and it's really important to learn how to write. And I'm fully in support of that. And so one example would be, why don't we have a project where the kids write their own book, and they go through the entire publishing process, and they can write their own, let's say, children's book. Maybe they go and they interview somebody in their family that they love, and they ask that family member, what is one story, let's say they interview their grandpa, what's one story from your life that you can tell me about? And then they turn that piece of history from their own family tree into a story that they then turn into a book, and they publish it and everything. And so they're learning how to write by actually writing. And so that's kind of that authenticity piece. And so I have ideas like that. I have a lot of ideas for all the disciplines, and we don't need to start from scratch. And we're going to work together as a teacher team. And so the way that I thought about this happening is on Fridays after school, for example, we could all get together as a teacher team, have professional development, talk about how that previous week went, talk about our ups and downs, talk about how to move forward for the next week. And what that does also is, because all the teachers are going to be, close-knit team of teachers, we're going to know what everyone else is doing. We're also going to be communicating that with the teachers, with the parents, like I had mentioned. And so what that does is open up the opportunities for collaboration. So, for example, if they're learning about colors, right now we actually are partnered with the EPICS program in the College of Education. So we actually have elementary ed students, and this answers part of your question too, developing some of these units for us. Now, obviously, we have to take a look at that, because Purdue's a secular university. We want to make sure it's appropriate for this school, but teams of teachers are already working on developing curriculum for these disciplines that will help. One of them is on colors. And so at some point in time, students need to learn about primary and secondary colors. They need to understand that pigments are different than light. And so the light that's shining on us right now is RGB. Red, green, and blue are the primary colors of light. And there's a difference between additive and subtractive. But the idea there is that you can have that in art class, but you might also have that in science class that same week. And you might also have that in religion class. I mean, think about the rainbow and symbolically what that means, like biblically, like God's promise, and what are the colors that are involved in the Bible. And so what we can do is try to teach in a way that we're really collaborating together in an authentic way, not just saying that we would like to collaborate like a lot of times what happens in the public schools. We actually can collaborate as a team, and we can give each other ideas, and we can work with each other, and we have that flexibility, which is great. And that's why, I think that eclectic piece is so important. But does that answer your question?
Mostly.
Okay.
Also, another thing, the teachers that you're going to be hiring, how important is having state certification? Because, for example, the state philosophy of education is very different than a Christian philosophy of education. If we're going to be having a Christian-centered school, you're not necessarily going to want the influences that would come from state. The information you have to ingest and have to spit out in order to get a state certification. Because I know quite a few Christian teachers who won't get certified.
Yeah, so the question was, in terms of teaching certifications, what's the requirement there? My teaching certification expired recently. I didn't renew it, and I don't think I plan on renewing it. But I was certified as a public school teacher. I was rated as highly effective for multiple years there, so I'm familiar with how that works and how you usually need to be certified in your area and in order to teach. And luckily, we are completely outside of that because we're not going to take any government money, and so we don't necessarily have any of those regulations that you would in that sort of environment. So we do not require the teaching certifications. We think that, if somebody has it, we're not going to hold it against them by any means, but it's not something that we necessarily need to worry about. And in terms of even if somebody had it, we want these positions to attract the type of people that are going to view this as a career position, not necessarily as a stepping stone to something else. And so that, because we really want to retain our teachers, right? Like in an environment like this, we really want to make sure that, whoever we hire is going to be with us for the foreseeable future. And so I think on that note as well, it becomes even more important to support them and to just treat them as individuals and look at their individual experiences. And just because they took a test, like I took a math test and a physical science test or something to be able to get certified in these disciplines, like that's not the only way to prove that you're qualified to do something. And so I think that would be the answer to that. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So you said you work at Purdue. I'm a little short for this mic. Do you plan on still working at Purdue when you launch the school, and how do you plan on balancing working at Purdue and being the principal? Because that might seem like a lot to me.
Yes. So the question was, I'm working at Purdue currently. Do I plan on continuing to work at Purdue? If I do that, how am I going to balance that with also being the principal at the school? Does that kind of capture your question? Okay. So I think the answer to that is a couple things. One is that I have kind of a history of doing things like that. In my undergrad, I did a triple major and a minor, and so at one point I was taking 26 credit hours and working 40 hours a week. So I didn't enjoy that, but I did it, and so I just kind of viewed my challenges as just things that needed to be done. And that's part of the answer, but it's not the whole answer, because the priority for me is with the school. And if I can work at Purdue, that would be great to keep my foot in the door. I would love to have an influence on the educational system at Purdue and preparing some of the public school teachers, which I'm currently doing, because I'm currently teaching that master's course for the public school teachers. And so I can have an influence through that position at Purdue. And so I basically am going to be graduating this summer with my doctorate. So right now I'm a doctoral candidate at Purdue, and I plan on finishing my dissertation and graduating this summer. And so I'm not technically a doctor yet, but it hopefully is going to be there this summer. That's the plan. And then next year, the plan is that I'll start working at Purdue in a professor position. I'm not going to be pursuing like a tenure track professor position, at least at first, because those, if you're familiar with those, that's just really fast paced. And so what I'll be doing is more of like a kind of a continuing lecturer type of thing, where I can go in and teach some courses. Like the one I'm doing now is an online asynchronous course for the master's teachers from all over the state. And so they kind of work through the course at their own pace, and I just need to be there to provide them feedback and, keep the course structured for them. But we don't even have a necessary set meeting time, and because it's asynchronous and because it's online, we don't need to meet in person. And so that provides a lot of flexibility for me, where I can come in during the day and be here in person and provide the full attention that the school is going to need. And then after school, I can keep up with some of that additional work at Purdue. But that balance is something that I'm currently figuring out, and it's definitely, a slight concern for me, but I'm also, I know that if the time comes where I can't balance it, then I'll just probably not pursue that position at Purdue anymore, and I'll just fully come to the school. But I do think that it's important for me to have an influence not only at this school, but also at Purdue. And I think that's also going to provide some unique partnerships for our students as well, to be able to connect them with certain people. So, for example, Purdue has a drone club. And so if you want the kids to learn about drones, it might be nice to approach the drone club and maybe see if they want to come over for the day and teach our kids how to fly drones outside or something like that. I mean, there's a lot of cool things. And then at Purdue, they have like a $10 million supercomputer that we could potentially tour. I mean, they have human cadavers. They have all sorts of things that we might not be able to have access to here. And so, partnering with Purdue at some level, I think, would be pretty unique. And I think that would be beneficial for them and for us. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
My other question is, do you think it's a lot to ask your teachers to teach from like pre-K all the way up to, I guess you're only doing 8th grade. Like that's a really wide range of like ages.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I'm not a teacher, but I feel like that might be like a lot to ask of one individual
Yes.
to teach like all these different age levels.
Okay. That's a great question. So the question was basically, it might be a lot to ask one teacher to teach that particular discipline at all levels. And yes, it is difficult to do that. And so that's why we really want to find the right people. However, it does open up the opportunity to be able to sprinkle in some of these more advanced topics earlier and earlier. And so someone like me could step in as the math or the science teacher. I would be comfortable teaching either one of those disciplines at all levels because I kind of already do that. And I find it really exciting. So even people who don't think that they can do it, I think it's really exciting when I first stepped in, starting to teach, quantum physics to like a first grader. And like some people think that that's like not possible, and it totally is. And so I think it provides some really cool opportunities for you to have some more maybe knowledgeable teachers step into these positions and be able to sprinkle in those concepts earlier and earlier. There's really, with a small school model like this, there's a couple options. One is that we could do what's similar to the current system. In the early grades, they have, as you're familiar with, you have kindergarten and first grade teacher, second grade teacher, and they move from, one grade to the next, and one teacher basically kind of teaches everything in the early stages, and then by the time they get to high school, they break off into physics teachers, chemistry teachers, and whatnot. And so early on, we could potentially do the whole thing where, one teacher teaches all the HAMSTER disciplines, but we feel like it's going to be much easier and practical to find somebody who really loves art, for example, and wants to teach it to anybody no matter what age, rather than trying to find somebody who can teach, one level at all, all disciplines. And so there's one aspect of it for sure that we're trying to think about. I would also point to the idea that like a lot of homeschools currently, sometimes depending on how much they reach out, I mean, sometimes it's just the parent teaching all levels at all disciplines, like all disciplines and all levels on one person.
Right.
You have resources like as a homeschooling parent. I mean, people know more than me about that, I'm sure, here today, but you have different avenues to get help, but for the most part, it's you and your kids, and you're trying to teach or at least facilitate the teaching of every discipline at every level, and you just kind of grow alongside those children. Another thing I want to point out is that this provides a wonderful opportunity for the building of relationships from level to level, because what happens right now a lot of times, and even my wife teaches a course where it's only like one semester. And so by the time you get to know the students, you have to send them to the next teacher. Right. And it's like, you really, if you want to really teach to the individual, you have to know the student, and you have to have time to get to know them. And so with a system like this, the curriculum mapping is what they call it, it becomes a lot easier. Like the curriculum mapping is basically when you take something like math and you say, here's what we're going to teach them in first grade, here's what we're going to teach them in second grade. And so, the teachers are kind of familiar with that, but it's like, okay, I'm going to teach first grade, let's pass them off to the next teacher. That whole idea of curriculum mapping becomes a lot easier when it's just one teacher per discipline, because they have the whole perspective on what needs to be happening. And they can start sprinkling in concepts like calculus into fifth grade. It becomes really awesome to be able to lay that foundation for them for some of these more advanced topics earlier and earlier. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hello.
Sorry. Oh, okay. So, since you do only have 7 teachers, do you have a plan for like substitutes for absences, or like what their qualifications are, or anything you're requiring necessarily?
Yes, that's a great question. So the question, if you didn't hear it, was about substitute teachers. Like, since we only have 7 teachers, what happens if one of our teachers gets sick, which inevitably is going to happen? Yes, so we are going to have, like, if you look at the support applications, so we have 3 levels of applications. This might give me a chance to kind of go a little bit more in depth on each level. So the executive applications will be, the president, vice president, treasurer, things like that. We want to form an advisory board. So if anybody's interested in joining the board of advisors for the school, and we're going to meet once per quarter at least to go over the future direction of the school. That's basically at the executive level. Now, at the faculty level, that's where most of the tuition money is going to be focused towards the people who run the school on a regular basis. So that'll be the 7 teachers and your 1 principal. Then the support positions are going to come in to provide support. That'll be like general volunteers, head of security, additional security guards, substitute teachers, assistant teachers, possible custodians to help clean up. However, we do want our students to clean up after themselves, and we want to model that. I mean, this is God's house that we're in right now, and we want to make sure they're picking up after themselves, and we're developing that character. But you still might have the need, especially after events, to have an extra set of hands cleaning up. And so that would be the support level positions, and they would come in, and definitely we would want to make sure that anybody at any level, so executive, faculty, or support, all of them are going to do the background checks. And so we're going to have them, on file and everything, and we're going to do our diligence to make sure that they're ready to go in that respect from a security perspective. And so I think that should be totally fine to have that in place, and that we do plan on doing that. Does that answer your question?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
And then I had one more. Since there is such a limited amount of like space for the kids, if you have a child with unique talents that are above average in some aspects, but then have some delays in others, and that not special needs as much, but just need some extra help in certain subjects or areas, would you encourage them to apply, or would you think that it is just a school that's going to be geared towards does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
Okay, sorry.
So tell me if I captured the question. So the question was, if you have a student who's gifted in some areas, but maybe not other areas, would they be okay to potentially apply since this is, a school for gifted kids? Is that kind of
Yes, and
Your
then
question?
if they did need some help in those areas that they are a little step back in, how would you meet them individually?
Yeah, and so if they do have any setbacks, how would we meet them individually? So that's a great question. I think first and foremost, we have to understand that, the individualized aspect of this school is something that we want to focus on. And so we're going to meet them where they are, especially at first. The first year, when people are coming in from a variety of different settings and a variety of different prior knowledge to come into this school, for example, the 8th graders that come in and they've already had a lot of their education, we have to meet them where they're at. And so it'll be a combination of kind of figuring out what their strengths are and what their passions are, and strengthening those strengths, but also identifying weaknesses and helping them overcome those weaknesses. And so I think that that's also where some of the technology can come in and help, because something like math, for example, if they're behind in their math, we can get them oriented towards the particular level of math that they're comfortable with, and so that will be part of their day, not the whole day, but part of their day will be in math class, kind of individually practicing those skills wherever they're at. And so when you learn, you can only learn in the zone of proximal development pretty much, and so you have things that are too hard to learn, you have things that are too easy, and you get bored. And there's that sweet spot called the zone of proximal development. And so that's where we want to keep most of these students. And so we need to identify where that is. And basically anybody, the only way to learn really is to integrate that learning into your prior knowledge, or whatever that is. And everybody is different. So I think that that's not going to be as much of an issue because we're going to try to tailor our curriculum to the individual. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So we got time for at least one more question quick, and then I think we're good.
So will there be like an actual grading system? Okay, you get an A, B, C, D, E, F kind of thing. Obviously not E, but maybe E, excellence. But will there be a grading system? And if so, how will that work?
Sure. So is there going to be a grading system? Yes. The idea of evaluation and assessment is an integral part of authentic learning. But that assessment is going to be done mainly for the purposes of benefiting the student, and there's multiple levels of assessment. So you can there's basically formative assessment, which is assessment for learning. There's metacognitive assessment as learning, like reflecting on your own learning. And then there's summative assessment, which is assessment of learning to see if learning actually took place. But in terms of the scale, we think it would probably be beneficial to stick with what people are familiar with, especially from a college perspective. Most colleges are used to the 4.0 system. And so a 4 represents an A, a 3 represents a B, and so on. And so we will most likely be providing those grades on that scale. And so that way it'll be easily recognizable for those purposes on their transcripts. And so we absolutely are going to be evaluating these kids and providing these grades in these different disciplines for them.
And one more, what type of disciplinary, you can tell, what type of disciplinary action will be for children who are a little bit extra?
What sort of disciplinary action will be given for children who might be a little extra?
Yeah, how do you plan to do the disciplinary actions as far as, keeping kids in line and not being too wild, I guess?
It's a great question, because I think it's a balance between something like, which you might have heard before, like let boys be boys, and there is that to a certain extent where we want to allow them to get all of this built up energy out of their system that they have, but we also want them to learn. I mean, even with the gifts and the fruit of the Holy Spirit, like we have self-control as one of those things, and we want them to be able to control their own behavior and develop that self-control in them. And so I think it's a balance of, it's kind of like controlled chaos. It's kind of like one of those things where it's like, yes, it's going to be chaos in a certain extent, but it's a controlled chaos. It's an appropriate level of chaos for that grade level. And so the way that we'll approach discipline is, as biblically as we can. And in the Bible, it basically is saying that if you don't discipline your child, then you don't really even love your child. Like, in order to love your child, you need to discipline your children. You need to help them integrate into society and develop Christ-like character. And so I think that's going to be a big part of what we do, is not just the disciplinary content stuff, but also developing that Christ-like character. And part of that is going to be self-control, for sure. And so that's kind of our approach to that. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. So I think, any other questions last minute? I think that'll do it for today. I think it would be appropriate to end with prayer. And so, come Holy Spirit, fill us up. Father, we thank you for this gathering here today. We ask that you help us make the correct decisions for our children and their future. We dedicate this school to you, and we ask that you help us start these children off on the way that they should go. And Father, we also just ask for a revival in the American educational system as a whole. In Jesus' name, amen.
I'm in your class right now. You are? Yeah, I'm in the